true group process really is a process. It takes time, and there's some intentionality to it, and sometimes there's just some luck to it, and ultimately there's some divine intervention that we all get to see, and that's the cool stuff, right? But today, I'll just kind of give you a generic picture of what I'm going to do, and then we're going to go to it, okay? Because of the time limitation, we're going to talk about stuff, but normally I would demonstrate that for you, okay? But we'll talk about some of those kinds of pieces and how we can better facilitate that. I built this around questions that were given to me that supposedly you all sent in, and so I'm trying to target it and make it very clear to your needs. And if you have questions, you want to do follow-up work, whatever, I'll make myself available for that, and we can dig into that kind of stuff. So this is just an opportunity to really better facilitate the processes that we have with those people that are in the trenches, and that's the stuff I love doing. So that's who I am, that's where I've been my life, and that's what you get. So what you see is what you get. I don't hide a lot of stuff, and so I don't pretend to be something I'm not. A little bit about me. I went to Concordia Seward with that crazy guy in the back of the room known as Bart Day. So go Bulldogs. Right away, I meet someone this morning, and they said, "Oh, I'm supposed to greet you as they got it wrong, but Pugsley." Yeah, that was my nickname in college, and that's how everybody knew me. So I don't know if Bart had an official nickname, and we won't tell you what we used to call him. So no, I'm kidding. But went to school, did my undergraduate work at Concordia Seward, and ended up back there via some ministry opportunities and some fun stuff along the way. I started out as a Lutheran school teacher and youth worker in Coleman, Alabama. Served there for a few years. Started working a master's in family studies. Saw a great need for working with families and the hurting that was taking place in families. And so wanted to learn more because that's what I was doing. Started working on a master's. Started working on a second master's in parish education because they kind of coincide together. When I left Alabama, I went to Nebraska to serve as their freshman counselor. I worked in the counseling office underneath a counselor as an intern, mostly just doing crisis intervention referral stuff. While I was there, finished my degrees in parish education and in family studies, and then served as a DCE in Colorado, where I started a day school, Trinity in Franktown, Colorado. And so got the joys of starting a day school and all the wonderful ministry of that, and served as a DCE and oversaw all of the Christian education that took place at the church. Worked very, very closely in some neat ministry teams. So from there, then took a call to Concordia in St. Paul, Minnesota, where I served as the director of the DCE program, teaching people how to do that stuff. So did that for 4 years, and then took a call to Concordia in Seward, Nebraska, where I got the opportunity to really just teach, and that's what I love to do, is to teach. And so served a couple of different roles in there, including graduate dean. But now I'm back in the classroom just doing some department chair stuff and having fun teaching. I'll tell you how I start things. I usually start class radically different than I would a normal class when I'm talking about group dynamics, because all of you came in here with something. You all came in with a lot of things, actually. You came in with patterns of behavior. And those patterns of behavior dictate how you will behave in the new group that you go into. Your comfort levels of how you interact with one another and your personality type as you enter into a new setting always shapes you. Unless you think not, just think about what was going to your mind when you first came to this event. You may have been to it before, you may have old friends here, but think about what was going on. You always have that little tweak that says, this is different, this is new, I need to do something about it. And so, along with me, would you turn off your cell phones, by the way? Because if it rings, it becomes mine, and I need a new one. Just kidding. But seriously, let's try to put technology. It's only an hour. You can handle it. Okay. I'll try to entertain you, or I'll do a really poor job and put you to sleep. But either way, it's better than a phone call. So anyway, you brought stuff in with you. As you think about that stuff that you brought with you, you now act accordingly. And so when you came in here, you sat down by somebody, or you sat in a particular place. Why did you sit there? Who can answer that for me?
Because I sat here yesterday.
Thank you. All right, we call that in group dynamics territoriality. You've already created your space, right? And it's my space. And I bet you I can already tell you what you've done to create your space just because I know people. I've watched them for a lot of years and have studied people. I watch people. That's my fun job, right? Some of you are very organized, neat, and you like its structure. You don't want people bumping your space, right? And so there's a zone of proximity. I won't pick on anybody, but we can look around and see who that is, right? Now, some of you don't care about that. Some of you have stuff everywhere. You have stuff here underneath the table, around you, maybe even out in the hallway or in the back of the room. Some of you, space is not so tidy. It's all over the place. Some of that's personality. Some of that's your comfort level. And some of it is how you manage yourself in the context of that situation. And so depending on the environment, depending on who's there, the relationships, and depending on the structure of what you're doing, you will act and behave certain ways. We all do, right? When I got the email that said, no coat and tie, I reacted. I was like, I've been to the IC a number of times, and there's a dress code, or there used to be anyway. And I remember the dress code being a coat, right? And typically a tie. And I thought, oh, man, I got to go speak in a coat and tie. I move around. I don't like to be in one structure, right? So when I saw that email, I was like, yes, woohoo, awesome. But I also knew that meant something for you. You see, that type of attire changes how we behave in certain circumstances, right? How we behave. All of that stuff plays into how we respond to one another. And that's fairly critical as we talk about groups. Well, I thought it only fitting that we look at a couple of things that will and sometimes do affect us. Have you ever seen a sign like that? I don't know about you, but that's a mixed message to me, right? Okay. That's in St. Louis, by the way. No, I'm kidding. I don't know. It seems like it. We were downtown earlier last week, and there's construction, and it says, this way to the highway. And so we go that way to the highway. You can't go that way. And so we follow the sign. No, this way to the highway, so we follow the sign. Finally, we just went, all right, just drive around until you find it, right? Sometimes we do that. We have to figure it out. In fact, most of the time, as we behave with one another, we're just figuring it out. We see signs. Sometimes they make sense. Sometimes they don't make any sense, right? And we're not sure how to behave. We're using all these cues that are around us. Some of you may have studied emotional intelligence. Emotional intelligence is paying attention to the cues that are around you. That's all it is, okay? In a nutshell. We can talk a lot more about that if you'd like, but what about this? Now, it's kind of blurry. Sorry about the picture. This is a back-to-school sale. What? It says back to school. It got cut off. I'm not sure what's going on with that, but it's a back-to-school sale, and it's knives. What the heck? Sometimes the message we get seem to make sense. Woohoo, a sale, good, I'm all in. Knives, what? Holy cow. And the scary part is there's clothes on one side and liquor on the other. Okay? Unless you think that's crazy enough. Oh, shoot, this got turned around. How did that happen? But notice the sign on the top. Sorry, all of you turn this way and look. All the best for your baby. It's all alcohol, right? Confusing signs. Sometimes they just mess with you, right? What about this one? How many legs does he have? It's all about perspective, isn't it? If you look from top down, you see something, or if you see from the bottom up. We could look at lots of pictures that we can look at and say, what is it? And we have an answer, but then it changes when we change our perspective. And sometimes that happens to us as humans very quickly. We have this little process in our brain that causes us to fill in gaps. It's called Gestalt theory, right? So if we draw a circle and we start here and we go right here, right away it's a circle, right? It has to be a circle. Plus he said it was a circle. We fill in the gaps and we make it happen. We can read garbage on a page and make it be words if we rearrange all the letters. Our brains can actually make sense of that. It's pretty crazy. Our brains are always trying to make sense of the interactions that are taking place around us all the time. But in all reality, sometimes we are blinded by those things that are taking place around us. And so we come in, we sit down, we're all comfortable. We think we got it all figured out. And all of a sudden, over the loudspeaker, it says, this plane's leaving for Kansas City. I'm supposed to go to St. Louis. You ever have one of those moments? I got it all figured out. And then all of a sudden, nope, not, right? I kid you not, I'm coming here from Omaha. They have the little tickets. They don't let anybody buy unless it beeps, right? There's a lady sitting next to me. They said, this plane will be leaving for St. Louis, going on to Chicago. She looks at me. This is a flight to St. Louis? Yeah, I'm not supposed to go to St. Louis. Then you probably better say something about that. She's freaking out. She got on the wrong plane. How did that happen? Beats me. Beats me. But it happened. She was freaking out. Okay? Have you ever had those moments? We usually identify those as embarrassing moments because why? What?
It wasn't what we thought.
It's not what we thought, and it's a mistake. I made a mistake. What else is going on? Yeah, people are looking at me, aren't they? Oh my gosh, I don't got my act together, right? I don't feel okay. The bottom line around group dynamics, if you want to be able to manage them, to have some influence over group dynamics, you have to recognize the basic tenets of how we as humans behave. We sometimes fill in gaps that aren't there. We sometimes even build facades around us to say things that aren't there. Okay? We might go as far as say, we sin, right? We sin. Oh, there's the theology part. Okay. We sin, don't we? We make mistakes. Sometimes we do things intentionally, and sometimes we do them unintentionally. Those sins of omission, right? We're not even aware of the things that are going on around us. But sometimes they're not even sin. They're just the reality of how we behave with one another. And as a result, we sometimes become blind to our own behavior. And as a result, we are not aware of what's going on. And so sometimes we'll be in group settings and we will be dominating the heck out of that group setting, and we don't even know it. Sometimes we might be in a group setting and we are quiet as a church mouse. I've never really seen a church mouse. I'm sure they're around. Have you seen them? You've seen them? Is there an IC mouse? No. But we will do things and not even be aware of them at all, even in our social interactions. You know what I'm talking about. There's nervous habits that we have. You've already picked up on some of mine, haven't you? Who can tell me what they are? Pacing, yeah. I like to walk around, right? I got to get rid of some of this energy. I tend to be a little ADD, right? Okay? Don't put me in a little room and expect me to hold myself still. It's not going to happen, okay? I will find things to do, okay? I'm never bored, okay? There's always things going on. If they're not going on out here, they're going on in there, okay? So they're always moving. I have things happening, right? You're picking up on that. What else can you tell me about me? I fiddle with my clicker. Probably I'll turn it off 3 or 4 times. I'll set it down. I'll put it in my pocket. I won't know where it is. All kinds of things like that. Yeah, you already picked up on that. Good. You guys are really with it. High EQs. I can talk fast. Yeah.
Clear your throat.
I do. That's something I should apologize for right now. I have something, I don't know what it is. It's not like a virus or anything like that. I just have this dry cough and I can't get rid of it. And so I have an appointment to the doctor when I get back. but so I'll cough a lot, so I apologize. It's not that I have a disease or anything. But if you'd like, I'll lick your hand. Behave or I'll do that, right? Does anybody recognize what I put up on the board there? Very good. You're familiar with Johari's window. It's not rocket science. It's actually pretty much just common sense, but it's worth us taking a look at for just a moment. What this matrix does, it helps us look at ourselves and others and how we perceive things. We were talking about perception a little bit ago. This identifies the things that are known by myself, known to me, and things that are known to others. Okay? These are things that are unknown by others and unknown by myself, right? It just helps us kind of quantify or look at the perspective that we bring. So there are some things that are what we call in the open area or free area, and these are things that are known, I know about myself, and others know about me. I know I wore a blue shirt. Did you know that? Very good. I know I wore a belt. Yes. And you know I'm wearing a belt, right? There's some things you just know, right? But there are some things that you don't know that I know. I know what color of boxer shorts I wore. And that's good, right? Some things are well enough left alone, aren't they? But some things aren't. Some things are worth us knowing for ourselves and for others. This is where we enter into group process and why process is important, so that we can start to open up the relationship that we have with one another. It doesn't just say, I recognize you're here and I'm here, right? We can kind of stay on a very surface level. I can say, hey, he's got a name tag on and it's Gary, so he must be Gary. Might be wrong. You could have switched with somebody and really messing with me today. That could happen, right? He's wearing a clerical collar. Wonder what that means. Pastor. Oh, good. Hi, Father. How are you doing? Right? We fill in those gaps by the things we see. We make assumptions by the things we see. Am I always correct? What if I came in wearing a collar? What would you all think? I almost did, but then I thought, Bart's going to be here. No. No. What would you think? You think, oh, pastor, right? Pastor. And then when I took it off, you know, what would you think? The reality is we don't always have a full perception, and so it's worthy of us to go beyond that, right? What Johari's window does is help us understand that. So in this open area, there's things known to us, known to others. There's a couple of other areas. This is where it's unknown to me. I don't know it, but you know it. Is there anything that you've observed that I might not be aware of? Okay. Yeah, I had that happen. True story. I was student teaching in Fort Wayne, Indiana, Holy Cross. Had a wonderful cooperating teacher, and my university supervisor was there, Lee Holtzen. Okay? And he was kind of a stoic guy. He was the registrar for years at Concordia. And he kind of scared me. I got to be honest, I was nervous. First time, I'd only talked to him like once on the phone prior to this. He's sitting in the back of the room with my cooperating teacher, and I'm teaching adverbs or something like that, writing on the board, and I'm kind of nervous, right? Because I'm being observed, student teaching. And as I'm walking around the room, I hear this come out of a young child's mouth. Zip. And I thought, what the heck? So I instantly go, good teaching methodology, ignore the behavior, right? Ignore the behavior and it'll go away. You little snot, how dare you do that when I'm being observed? You know, you can do that any other time and I'll give you a high five, but right now I'm going to hit you. You know, that's what's going on in my head, right? And I'm so fixated on being perfect and making it right that I forget all about what that might mean, zip, right? And so I turn around, I'm writing on the board, and I get done with the lesson, and I'm like, okay, we're going to use some more good methodology. I'm going to walk around the room, some guided practice, right? And so I give them some homework to work on. I'm going to walk around and check it. And so I'm walking down the aisle, and just as it's a room kind of like this, I'm walking right here, I hear zip, zip, zip. What the heck? Well, I'm nervous. I'm trying to do the right thing, and all that can go through my head is this. Are my pants unzipped? And I didn't really realize it, but I said it verbally. What, are my pants unzipped? And I looked down. Not only were they unzipped, my white shirt was sticking out. Oh my gosh, okay? Talk about a reality of unknown to me, but known to others, right? I think that's the only reason I passed in teaching, because he fell on the floor laughing. Okay. And I kid you not, true story, you can ask him. He does have Alzheimer's now, so that's a benefit for me. But I shouldn't joke about that. It's a pretty serious thing. But Lee and I became good friends through that, thankfully. But that's a situation where it's totally clueless, right? I have no idea. Another quick one, I walk across campus to the library and different places. And I had a student finally, I was teaching about this concept in class, and I said, is there something that you observe about me? I usually get cheesy little answers that don't mean anything. You know, you got a fly on your shoulder, you know, stuff like that. And a student said, Mr. Warren, why are you pissed at the world all the time? What? Holy cow. I said, I'm not mad at why do you think that? Because when you walk across campus, you look like you're going to kill someone. Really? I learned something about myself. It was completely unknown to me. When I'm thinking, and when I'm walking across campus, I'm always thinking, the furrowed brow happens, right? I become pretty serious looking. Even though I'm not, I'm just going through my day having fun. But apparently I look really mad. So I went home to my wife and I said, is this true? And she said, oh yeah. Where would you like me to start with other things? Time out, we're done. All right, unknown to others, but known to self. There are things about me. I said the box shorts, all those kinds of things. There are things that I know about me that you don't know, and I don't want you to know, right? I want to keep it hidden, right? Sometimes it's better if I were to share those things. We firmly believe in confession, don't we? And when we confess it, we really put it out there before God and before others. I believe, this is my personal belief, that we are missing something in the church now, and that's private confession. We still have it, but we don't practice it very much. And it kind of makes me sad, because when we do reveal that, it cleanses us and it opens us up. It helps us recognize something. It's an incredibly beautiful practice in the liturgical practice of our church, was to have private confession before communion. What a beautiful picture, right? I'm opening myself up before God so that I can receive the wonderful gifts and grace. This is before Him. I recognize my junk before Him. And I have to do that before someone else, which even forces me to be real now with me. That's tough. Now, we all know our brains can flip that around and challenge that. We'll lie, right? We'll hide it still. But what a beautiful practice. So what this does, though, is it gives us this wonderful box. The bigger we get this open area, the more transparent we are, the more real and genuine we are, the more honest we can be with one another. We're opening up before one another. There is this other fourth area, and this is something where it's unknown to us and unknown to others. Okay? We do depend on feedback to get this to ourselves. We also disclose ourselves to others to open up this hidden area. Here, it typically is a shared discovery, but it's also a self-discovery and others' observation process. I'll give you an example of what this might be. You see, I joke about this, but I shouldn't. I could have cancer and not know it. Right? That's one we all can relate to, right? We don't know it, no one else knows it, until we go through a process of discovery. And as we go through that process, then it becomes real for us. And now it's known, and it's apparent, we can do something about it, right? Sometimes we can't. Sometimes those things others see, but most of the times they don't. We're still in this unknown area. And so the process of discovery is helping us do that, to become open. As we become open, now we have a means by which we can interact at a different level. This is what we call opening up, and we'll talk more about that in terms of a process piece, okay? Types of function of small group. One of the most important things to remember when we're working with groups is, what type of group is it, okay? There are different types of groups, and based on the types of groups, they have different functionality, and they have different purpose. You see, you have a reason to be at this meeting and be in this group, don't you? Now, your reason might not be the same as the person sitting next to you. Some of you might be saying, hey, I like that group because it gives me status. Some of you might say, I like that group because I get to help someone else go through some of the stuff that I had to go through, right? Some of you say, I get to do this because I get to interact with my friends, and it's fun, and it's a really good way to serve the church. This is good stuff, right? We all have different reasons. But those different reasons play into the functionality of the group. So if we all come in with different reasons, and the group is meant for something over here, but we're not focused on that purpose or reason for that group, all of a sudden we start to function different. And it takes longer for that group to process in order to be focused on what it needs to be focused on to get the job done. So it's pretty critical that we understand that. Let's take a look at some of these types. There's task-oriented groups. These are really about completing tasks. We call those secondary groups because it's not necessarily about me, right? It's more about the task or accomplishing a role. There's relationship-oriented groups, inclusion and infection. Yeah, there we go. Affection. We call those primary groups because then it is about me, right? It's about me and how I serve and how I manage that. There's some meetings you probably don't want to go to, right? Oh, yeah. But because of your role, you have to be there, right? Oh man, that might be one of those, right? It's a assigned group, you're on it. Hey, you got a title, you're going to be there, right? All of you pastors, guess what, right? There's a few of those meetings you're like, really? Oh God. But I got to do that, right? Okay? Worship, no, not worship. Emergent groups. Environmental conditions. These are things that are really about, they kind of happen, they are surrounded because of the environment and where we come into, right? We find ourselves in that. I found myself on an airplane talking to a lady because we were on a way there, and we started talking. I realized, hey, I actually know this lady. It's kind of crazy. Not the one that was going to fly to the wrong place, but another one. We started talking, and I was like, oh my gosh, yeah, you had your son in college, and we started talking, and I find out that she was serving on this committee with this women's leadership thing, and I had done that in the past. We start talking. It's like, whoa, my gosh, right? We start to open up, and we find ourselves in a group. She gives me a card, says, I'm going to call you next week. I'm like, oh, great, now I'm stuck. But yeah, I mean, that's what happens, right? We find ourselves in those things. These ones are really kind of more of the ones that we find ourselves a lot. Problem-solving groups and focus groups. Problem-solving groups exist to resolve an issue or overcome an unsatisfactory situation or obstacle achieved. They become very task-oriented, but they really are focused on solving a problem, not necessarily just creating or brainstorming something, but we got to fix it, right? So there's a different pressure involved into it. And then focus groups, small groups of people who are asked to discuss a particular topic or issue. We see that a lot. Probably this building gets tons of these, right? I've been at a lot of them here. So, and then this one. None of us do this, do we? Social groups. They exist just for the joy of socializing with others. Now, my question is this. Who can answer this for me? Because I don't know, and I have to be really honest. I did a little research about PALS. I even got some information sent to me about PALS. But I got to answer a question for you and say, I don't know what type of group this is. There's a few more. Now, the reason I put the slide the way I did, because as I was trying to weed through it, I went, I'm not sure I understand the purpose of the group. And as a result, then, when we don't have a clear focus in what we're doing, sometimes it becomes difficult to manage the process because we're not sure of what to do when, right? Now, it's certainly possible to have groups function in differing roles. Happens all the time. By the way, it happened to you guys yesterday. You were meeting for a while, right? Probably more of one type of a group. Then you left, and as you were leaving, something else happened. You divided up into smaller groups, didn't you? And those probably were more social. I think you guys went out to eat, right? And then we started talking about other things, started mingling with other people. Guess what? The group morphed again, right? So it's real possible to have different functionality, same group of people, but different context. Notice what changes. The environment changes, the structure changes, the rules change, and maybe even the membership or the partnership. People come in and people go out, right? It's flexible, but yet without a clear focus, some set of rules, we have trouble. We'll have trouble delineating what role I have. And so a person might assume a role in one setting, but be in another setting, and then all of a sudden that role doesn't work, right? And we'll talk a little bit more about roles and some of the words I'm using, okay? So having a clear picture or purpose. A group goal or purpose is important in effectively managing and forming groups. You should know what your goal is. You should know what your purpose is. And purpose can shift. The purpose can be multifunctional, but it needs to be clear. If it's not clear, we run into things like that sign. Do I go? Do I stay? I don't know. Well, I guess I'll just play Swiss, right? And so I won't assume a role, even though I should have a role. I don't know how to do this. Or I'll assume roles that I probably shouldn't, right? And we run into that problem. And so clear purpose and direction is critical. And my guess is all of you right now can relate, right? You can all go, oh, been there, I'm there, I know how this works. Probably some of you have been doing these groups, recognize this, right? Based on some of the questions that I got, that's where I was headed. All right, so let's talk about some of these things. What are rules, norms, and status? These are pretty important for us to understand. Rules are group ground rules. These are things that are rules that are either articulated, written down, okay, said, spoken, or they are just assumed. When they are assumed, they really shift into this other rule, okay, and that's that of norms. These are standards that determine what is appropriate and inappropriate behavior in a group. We have norms, right? If I came in and told you a bunch of dirty jokes starting off, guess what? What would you do? Some of you'd be like, ha, that's great. Some of you'd be like, oh my gosh, who is this guy, right? And I would probably know pretty quickly where I stood because you would be giving me feedback, right? Be going, oh no. And Gary would be going, and now talking today will be, right? We'd be moving on. We'd find something else. Those are norms, you see? The norm is, this is how we behave. This is what we do. By the way, I'm not going to come in and tell you a bunch of dirty jokes, okay? I don't particularly like that. But it illustrates that point that, oh my gosh. And when I said I usually start a class by messing up the norms, I kid you not, I write on the board, sit down, shut up, take out a piece of paper, and write down what you observe. I write that on the board. Oh, at the beginning, I do say, welcome to class. I turn the lights down really low. I always ask for a classroom. I can adjust the lights. I turn it down so they can see, but they can't see real well. They can barely see the board to read it, right? I turn on heavy metal rap music, usually a combination of both, headbanger kind of stuff. And then I go and sit in a corner of the room, I take out a notebook, and I sit down and I just start writing everything I watch. I just watch people come in. And you should see what happens to a group of college students when they walk into a class like that. Like, wrong room, dude. You know, that literally happens. Some people stand outside. Some people come in and they're like, oh my gosh. Some people come in talking. Some people sit by each other. It's crazy. You know, you watch all different kinds of stuff happen. And then I just sat there, 10 minutes. I watch my watch, 10 minutes. And they're freaking out by then. 10 minutes is a long time not to be talking, right? Because it says shut up, right? And if somebody doesn't, it's really fun to watch because invariably someone will go, look at the board. Shh, look at the board. You don't want to tick him off the first day. right? Yeah. Oh, yeah, I forgot to tell you, put chairs up on the desks, okay? And there's never enough chairs, and they're all turned backwards, so that we watch who turns them around and who doesn't and all that kind of stuff. And then after 10 minutes, I get up on the table, I sit on the chair, and I stare at them for another 3 minutes. I just stare at them. And they don't know what to do, right? They literally freak out. Some of them are like, they're starting to have panic attacks. Some of them are wanting to talk. And I wait. After 3 minutes, I'm hoping somebody will talk because they usually are trying to lose it by then. And one will finally say to me, this is group tech, right? And you're Dr. Warren, right? Yeah? So what do you observe? I don't know. I want to say you're observing a really strange professor, but I don't. I make them figure it out, right? I do that because I'm trying to counter every norm that I can think of that they're bringing into the classroom, because I want to mess with them, right? You mess with your parishioners, you mess with your kids, you mess with your spouse, don't you? Okay? You know the norms. In fact, I bet, I just want to pick on one person. Who'd be brave? Anybody be brave? All right, married, right? Can you tell me some norms that Alan has? It's Alan, right? You're connected with Alan. Yeah, since the last name's the same, I was hoping.
He doesn't like change.
Doesn't like change. Keep going.
He has coffee in the morning.
What time?
7:05. He gets it ready at night. We walk in the morning. Goes to breakfast every Thursday with the guys.
Patterns of behavior, right?
Oh, very much so.
Yeah. We all individually have patterns of behavior. Now, what are some of the norms that you have? Careful with that one. But,
Did I have?
yeah, no, together.
Oh, together. We walk together in the morning.
Okay. Walk together. Do you greet each other the same way when you walk in?
Well, I give him a kiss when I leave for work. I usually leave.
Okay. Yeah, that's norms, right? What happens when she doesn't? Has she ever not?
Sometimes.
Yeah.
You're focused on what she needs to
What's that caused you to do?
be. Disappointed.
Yeah. Whoa. Did you hear that? Disappointed. Wow, we can do therapy later. That was the other degree that I got along the way. But you got disappointed. There are emotions around it, right? There are expectations around it. That's what norms do to us. We become comfortable with them. We're always seeking to be comfortable. We like that, right? Not rocket science. None of this is rocket science. All right, status, an individual's importance and prestige. Have you ever gave yourself a title or something that you didn't really earn? Like Chief Operating Officer of the Home? Right? CEO and mom, right? Of whatever household it is. Why do we do that? I mention that because Facebook is full of it, right? We're always finding some way of making ourselves look just a little bit better, right? Just look a little bit different. That's why I don't usually use the title doctor, because I don't want students to have a barrier. I don't want their respect because I have a title. Yeah, I earned the degree. Yeah, I did all that stuff. I want respect from them because of who I am. They don't know how to handle that because the norms say different, right? My wife, you know, one day I didn't kiss her when I was leaving. Same thing. I didn't kiss her. You know what she said to me? Jerk. I went, whoa, I was not expecting that at all, right? Like, why'd you call me a jerk? She goes, well, I leaned to kiss you, you didn't kiss me. I didn't even notice it. I was something on my, I was thinking about something else. And she's like, well, I thought you did it on purpose, right? It wasn't on purpose at all. We miscommunicate, right? And as we miscommunicate, now it causes problems in the group, doesn't it? Oh, start to see what happens, right? My status in my family got impacted by that because my daughter heard my wife call me a jerk. She was upset all day. I didn't know it. I got home, and my daughter was mad at me. I said, hey, honey. She always runs up and gives me a hug. She didn't give me a hug. Now I'm going, what? right? So I looked at my wife and she goes, she heard me call you jerk and she's really mad at you. I'm like, what did you tell her? Right? Instantly I'm filling in the gaps. She goes, I didn't tell her anything. I just said, I reacted. I tried to explain it to her. So I had to go talk to my daughter. I said, and she's looking at me with these sad eyes. And I said, honey, I love you and I really love your mommy. She's the greatest thing ever. She's God's gift to me. But it caused angst in our family, right? And so we sat down to the table and my son, which I didn't think was in any part of this, I sat down and he always switches my forks to mess with me. So I switched the fork back. He looked back at me. He goes, you are a jerk. Do you see the pattern of communication that happens? It's crazy what happens. We'll look a little bit more at these. Roles. Roles are consistent ways you communicate with others in a group. These are, we assume roles, we identify them as roles, but really they're patterns of behavior and communication. There's types of roles: task, social, and individual. Other issues that we need to deal with in groups are leadership and power. Those are not the same. Leadership, without going to a whole long class on leadership and all that kind of stuff, you can do this very quickly. Leadership equals influence. Leadership equals influence. If you influence someone, you have leadership. Okay? We can get into all that if you want to sometime. But power is different. Power is earned, given, taken, or borrowed. Referent power is borrowed. And then cohesiveness. You guys shared a little bit about that in the questions. The degree of interpersonal attractiveness within a group dependent on factors like proximity, similarities, attraction among the individual group members, group size, intergroup competition, agreement about goals. Bottom line with cohesion. Cohesion won't happen unless there's shared meaning or purpose or affinity. I have to have something there, right? I have to get something from it. By the way, if you haven't figured it out, we're selfish people, right? And so what am I getting out of it, right? Is always a part. You say, well, what about groups that are about service and those kinds of things? Yeah, but what are you getting out of it? It becomes the question. Is it just to give? Okay, what do you get when you give? By the way, we call that love, right? Simplest definition of love is to give. It's to give. And what happens when we give? We get to experience love. Isn't that so cool? And guess who's there? God. Wow, cool. Simple theology, but it's very powerful, and it's very powerful in groups. Okay? The role of leadership in small groups. We're going to zip through this real fast, I hope. Power in group leadership. There's a couple of different types of power. Distributive power. This is from a leader, right? Or there is a leader that distributes it. Integrated power and interdependence. Now, interdependence is one of those words we sometimes get messed up, but there's a sense of dependence and independence. Okay, if I'm independent, I'm by myself, right? If I'm dependent, I need someone else. Codependence is that process of we need each other in unhealthy ways, right? But interdependence says I have a sense of freedom or self in the context of my relationship with another in the things that they provide, right? That's a goal of marriage. It's also a goal of groups. We want to be as interdependent as we possibly can. We don't want to be dependent, and we don't want to be independent. Otherwise, we don't have a group. We have a conglomeration of individuals, right? Designated power, this is relational power. And then this idea of facilitator. These are all types of power that can be utilized in the concept of leadership in a group. The bottom one is the one I want to focus on, that's why I put it a little darker, okay? This idea of facilitator or guiding leadership, guiding influence. We don't want to have a group that is completely dependent on us if our goal is what you guys told me it was. None of those three that I had up there are really going to be very effective if you are a strong leader. You must do it this way. Hard to do therapy, hard to help people with their problems when I'm dictating the answers, right? You know that, just interpersonal skills. And so when we recognize this idea of a facilitator, then we recognize that has a different perspective. Facilitator says we, not me, and not you. It says we, okay? It's we. We're in it together. We're walking together. Everything I read, that's what PALS is about, right? Am I wrong? Okay, it's about a we. And so if we're going to be about that, we have to recognize something. Leadership is communication competence. Focuses on communicated behaviors used to exercise influence. Our behaviors. We influence one another all the time. Some of you are influencing me right now. Are you aware of that? Some of you are going, looking at your watch. Some of you are like, can I turn my phone on, please? Some of you are going, oh, I've heard this all before, right? And some of you are saying, I don't know about this guy yet. Well, some of you are going, yeah, I'm with this guy. I got this. All those feedback pieces right now are behavior, right? It's almost all nonverbals. There might be a few getting towards verbal, like the grunt I heard a minute ago, okay? But they're really nonverbals, right? Two competencies used by leaders, task and interpersonal. These are your tools right here. If you have a clearly defined task for them to work on, it helps then facilitate the process of what's happening. The other one is you focus on the relationships, right? The interpersonal connections that are being made. If you effectively use those two, then group process becomes fairly easy. But we have to recognize that. And notice I keep saying process. I'm going to keep coming back to that. If you want effective groups, you want it to get the end result, you want it to be focused around a goal, you also have to look at the outcome, but you have to be intentional in the interim. How am I going to get them there, right? I have to be focused on the process. By the way, group process will happen. It just may not happen the way you want it to. So if you're intentional about it, hence the purpose of PALS, then we want to accomplish that via being intentional. These are the tools, okay? Task and interpersonal relationships. Okay, a facilitator. Leadership is planning. We need to plan ahead. We need to know where we're going and what we're doing. Know the task at hand. Know the people. Collect information. Distribute leadership. In other words, don't do it all yourself. Don't make it about you. And organize the discussion. Organize what we do. Be ready. Be planned, right? Be planned. Now, if I was going to do group process, I would do something like this, okay? I'd hand out like little cards, okay? I want you to hand out little cards. And I want you to write down this on those little cards. Pass them out. Come on. Yeah, you get to do it. Yeah. Oh, we're not just passive. Yeah.
Color means something?
That color means nothing, I promise you. At least for now. I see you've been there, huh? And that's my point. So often we go, oh, an icebreaker. Oh, a cheesy activity. Oh, whatever. And some of you are like, oh, I hate those things. And some of you are like, yeah, I love them. Bring them on, right? Here's what's important is that you need to recognize without the process, you won't be able to manage where we're going. And so those cheesy icebreakers are important. They aren't important for usually why they're written in the book, but they are important for the process. They're not important for an end, necessarily, but they are important for what we do. So this is one of the things that I might do. Usually we say, okay, introduce the person next to you, right? Oh, okay, that's cheesy, right? But I want to go a little farther with that. If you could ask any question that you wanted to ask of two people that you've gotten to know this weekend, or at least a little bit, and you haven't asked, what would be that question? Write it down. Use your brain, write it down. It's okay, it's safe. Now what we've done is you've now written something down that forces you to think through another individual, okay? You start to think about that process. Another concept is the concept of role. We each assume different roles. We have formal and informal roles, behavioral functions and task functions. These functions play into the roles that we have, and those roles then are helpful in managing group process. So rather than me be the person, if I'm facilitating groups, that manages all of those things like these little cards and stuff, we assign that to other people so that now they have ownership. They also see the task orientation and goal, and if they can do that effectively, now we've done a better job of creating we than me. That's a role distribution, but it also then depersonalizes it for me and helps them to feel a better sense of ownership in the whole collective as a group. And that's what we're looking for. We're looking for those roles to be distributed. Now, some of the questions that came to me were about how do we manage folks that maybe have a different mindset, right? Or disruptive or whatever. And we kind of talked about that a little bit before. What tends to happen is those folks tend to assume a role. And they assume a role because they're motivated by certain things. Yeah, they like to hear themselves talk. Maybe they're more motivated by by status or whatever it is, but they have an individual personal motive, okay? Those tend to focus on a role that's self-centered. So let's take a look at all the roles. Maintenance roles, these are roles that keep the group functioning, right? Encourager, harmonizer, compromiser, gatekeeper, standard setter. Without taking time to go through all of these are maintenance roles that help people function. They're the people that kind of ask questions, that drive the conversation, that keep us focused on the task, that will help one another do that. By assigning people roles, we can minimize some of the distractions that happen from others, and we'll talk about that in just a quick minute. Task roles, these are the things that get us to the task itself. Maintenance roles tend to keep us in a relational setting. Task roles tend to get us focused on getting done what needs to get done. Initiator, contributor, information seeker, excuse me, opinion seeker, information giver, and so on. The third is the one I want to focus on because of the questions I got. Self-serving roles. Blockers, aggressors, recognition seekers, the person who withdraws, a dominator, the joker, the self-confessor, the help seeker. You might identify with these as you've worked with groups, right? They're people that are drawing attention from the task or purpose of the group, and they tend to interrupt. Even though it may not be big or it may not end the group, it causes you to get delayed and not get done with what you need to get done, right? And so I'm going to give you a handout here that addresses kind of the key ones that you can take home with you, gives you suggestions of how to manage that, both personally as a facilitator with some language you can use to divert that disruption, but also to recognize that if I set up a good group process that surrounds them in a good environment, that other people have roles that will hold them accountable, that the group has a purpose, a clear purpose around them, then people are less likely to be those agitators, right? Or those self-seekers that pull away from the group, the individual, right? But it becomes more interdependent, and that's what we're looking for, right? Here's some characteristics of effective group members. They have experience, right? Doing something, problem-solving ability, openness, supportiveness, action-oriented, and positive personal style. This isn't ideal. We don't all come in with this. I certainly don't, right? But we can manage that by how we shape things as a group. So one of the questions was, how do we form a group to gel? And this is about cohesiveness. The other article I'm going to give you is about that. It's called Building Groups. It really comes from Denny Ryberg. We're going to talk about a couple other theories real fast. I'll put on the slide. But bottom line is there's a process that you walk through. If you use this process, you will gel your group. Okay? You will gel your group. One of those things is being able to share with one another in an open capacity. That's why I spent time on that. When we open up with one another, that's helpful. So there's a process that we can walk through, and if you flip to the back page of that, there's an illustration. So if we want to build groups effectively, This is a very simple process that we can understand. Bond building, helping people build a bond. Find connections with one another. You want to know what those silly icebreakers do? That's all they do. Okay? They help us recognize one another. They help to recognize the things that we share and the things that we don't. Right? They help us put some labels on things for one another, and we start to recognize that. Oh, where'd you go to the seminary? Oh, what did you do? Oh, where did you meet? Those kinds of things. Now, it's very surface, right? If you think of Johari's window, our goal is to open up the window. If we open up the window with others, guess what we're doing as a group? We're pulling together. That's what happens. And so if we open up, we start to risk a little more with the conversations that we have. We will start to connect at a deeper level. When I disclose something and you disclose something, guess what we've just done? We've connected. We call it relationship building, right? So we build a relationship. Now here's the one we usually forget. We need to affirm that person. They need to be affirmed that they're in the group, they have ownership, and they're important, right? When we do that, now they will be solidified in that connection. Then it allows us to stretch. Let's ask a little deeper. Let's go a little bit farther. As we go a little bit farther, then we make a connection. Now, here's where it gets risky, but we want to risk. As we risk, we push the group to become closer to one another. Now, remember, we have to not forget about opening up and affirming after we stretch. So this is kind of a circular process, not stair-step completely. It's more like a slinky on here, okay? But we're going to stretch, ask some further questions, and then we go to deeper sharing. As we get to deeper sharing, now we can talk to one another. Now we can be in with one another. What tends to happen with groups, though, if people are hurting, if they're there because they are trying to find some help, but they're not sure how to articulate that, they're managing some of their own junk, maybe they're struggling in their marriage, maybe they're struggling in the relationships with the parish, could be a number of things that they're dealing with. As soon as we get here, it gets kind of uncomfortable. When we get here, it gets much more uncomfortable. And this is where our little feelers or antennae need to be up, and we need to be really paying attention and saying, what the heck's going on here? This is where that EQ and watching what's happening in a group is pretty important. It's also very important for you as a leader to recognize there are other people in your group that have gifts and abilities that can help you do this. Some of those experienced people have been in the group. So if you have different, I think you guys have like 1 year, 2 year, 3 year folks, right? Those 3 year folks have been there, done that. They kind of see that. Don't let them sit passive and bored. Give them a role. Hey, I need you to pay attention. See if there's something going on. What's the body language happening? We're tasking over here, but pay attention to what's going on. When there's other people hanging on to those tasks, they start to recognize this. And now when it gets uncomfortable or things aren't handled very well, they can give you a clue, signal, whatever, hey, bozo, whatever it takes. But to say, okay, we need to address this, right? Now be careful not to address some of these deeper sharing issues in the group. That's not where it needs to happen, especially if it's of a personal nature. But what does need to happen is the group needs to know it's okay. They need to know it's okay. So as a group, it's important that you set up some rules and guidelines and norms that you guys have to help manage that. If you do that, then you'll be able to get to that next level. These are the traditional understandings of how we see group: forming, storming, norming, performing, adjourning. These are nice academic terms, but basically what happens is there's this forming process that happens. We get together, we start to talk to one another and those kinds of things, but then storming happens. We recognize differences. We recognize things aren't always okay. And we have to, at this point, stick with it. If we don't stick with it, then we start to divide the group and people will find roles on their own. And that's why it's important that you stay with it. Be patient in the group process. Once we get through that, then norming happens. We start to form our own rules. We start to form our own. At that point, it's okay to say, hey, we have some rules. Here's one. We need to honor one another. We need to respect one another. We need to let everybody have a share in talking. You start articulating those rules. Now people know it's not okay to interrupt, to be the dominator, to be those kinds of things. So we articulate the norming that takes place. We say it out loud, and all of a sudden now those expectations become ours, not mine as a leader. And that's what's important in facilitation. That's the difference between a leader and a facilitator. Facilitator says, we're going to do this together. A leader says, this is my rules, and we're going to follow them, right? Okay? Understanding group dynamics in terms of communication. This is about environment. The environment that you have people in is very important. Don't put them in an environment like this. If you do, I'll slap you. No, I'm kidding. But seriously, you want an environment that's shared, okay, and simply this, so that communication channels look like this. We want communication channels to be together. If we promote isolation, we de-emphasize unity. And as a result, we don't form community, right? And so we want something that looks similar to this. We have to be careful of this, definitely. Okay? That's why I said this is not a good setting. But this can be okay, right? The wheel kind of a model. So the environment that you have is pretty important. Make sure it's safe. Make sure it's open. I have a rule like this whenever I do groups. It's called the SAFE rule. We have to keep each other safe. That's it. How do we keep each other safe? Physically, emotionally, socially, spiritually, right? And I also say cognitively or mentally. We need to keep each other safe. And so I'm going to probably do some things that may cross that line. You need to call me out. And then vice versa, right? Pretty simple, safe rule. Just put safe on a whiteboard or somewhere and say, let's keep it safe and manage this with one another. And it's ours responsibility to manage that with each other, right? And then you can back away from that. And then as things start to happen, then you just get to go, I just got a question. Are we being safe now? I don't know, just checking. Okay. You know, is that respectful? I don't know. And those norms and things now start to become the pattern of what we do, as opposed to me being the enforcer, right? Ground rules. This is something that's absolutely critical, and that's where we write those rules down. Ground rules help with the flow and pace of discussions. They give boundaries. They help us value one another. Our tendency is we don't want rules, but rules are your best friend. Just don't make them legalistic rules. Make them guiding principles. Make them norms that we share together, not these hard and fast laws, okay? Ground rules help people to be more comfortable sharing deep and meaningful things. If there's boundaries, I know it's safe. If there's no boundaries, it's not safe, right? It's not safe. So I need to know it's safe, and then I'll move forward. Here's some samples, okay? Some things to consider: confidentiality, transparency, respecting each other, boundaries, resolving conflict. How are we going to resolve conflict? We might talk about that. That one's going to be one we figure out as we work through things. And then communication. What are the expectations of communication? If you say, we expect everybody to participate, but you don't follow through with it with your practice, now our norm is different than what we've said our rule is. And now we have those two signs going. We want to be careful with that and say, no, we want a we process here, and so we have to follow through on that. That's why it's important that we have other people have roles to help with accountability. Reflections on small group facilitation. These are some of mine, but this is what I would say. If you really want to make a good do a good job with a small group, here's what will help. Clear purpose. Make sure they know the purpose, and they know the purpose in its context. So if it's social time, it's social time. We can have a different set of rules. If it's talk time, then we need to talk, right? So there's a clear purpose, and we understand the group and we understand the people. We work towards good facilitation, doing it together, right? We're facilitating towards this in-group goal. And then articulate norms. Say them. Don't avoid them. Don't pretend everybody knows. Everybody doesn't know, okay? We don't know all the norms. I don't know all your norms. I'm a stranger in your group. The only way I can even know some of your norms is your body language, right? Or what you say and how you manage that. So make sure we articulate them. Distribute and monitor roles, especially for new folks, by the way, in that last one. Distribute and monitor roles, okay? Give other people roles, make sure they're doing them, right? Manage it as a group. Manage communication. This is critical as a facilitator. You want to make sure you're always watching what's happening in the communication. If two people are over here talking all the time, then you know you have to do something. Our natural tendency is to say, knock that off. But now we've created a norm that says not safe. How can we do something when people are talking and we need to redirect them. I gave you that a little bit of how to redirect people, but I'll give you an example. So if two people are disruptive and they're talking to themselves, you find ways to include them in what you are doing. So Alan, could you help me with understanding this over here? Oh, crap. Oh. Guess what? He just now got that pressure, what we were talking about, those norms that I get caught in, but recognize, oh, I shouldn't have done that. It's not okay. Now, he recognizes that. It's still safe for him. You give him an opportunity, tease with him a little bit, and now he's back in, right? And the guy sitting next to him is going, oop, don't want to do that, do I? Okay. Now, we've given him a little tap, but we've loved them, hugged them in it, and included them in the process, right? As opposed to saying, hey, Al, would you shut up? That just doesn't cut it, right? But I don't think he'd be the one, would he? Okay. Manage communication and then use the process. If you aren't intentional about process, you will have struggles. The process will help you manage the other stuff. These were the questions I got. When do I intercede when one or both of the couple are struggling? How to help a group gel, and moving forward when one is dominating the group. I specifically gave you a couple articles to look at, kind of edited articles, so that will guide you in that. Here's some last closing thoughts that I have. Articulate norms, ground rules, is kind of encapsulating what we talked about. Keep purpose in front of the group and what it is not. Okay? So let me give you an example. I was once in a group where there was a group of pastors and DCEs, and for some reason all they wanted to talk about was theology. Can't imagine. But the purpose of the group was not theology. The purpose of the group was problem solving some relational issues that were going on at the church. But that's all they would talk about. So we had to say, look, that's not why we're here. It's perfectly great to talk about that stuff. In fact, we think it's really important. And it has some interaction here. But right now, this is our purpose. We can talk about that when we go to dinner or some other time. That's usually safe because people always talk about theology of some sort at dinner, right? Politics, type of beer they like, whatever. And so shift that over. Provide tools and process to help people in safe ways, okay? What I mean by tools is this. If we provide tools like this at the beginning in a group and we say, we understand there are things going on with you and at your church and all that kind of stuff, and you may not feel safe to talk about those. But we have a way that you could bring that up and we'll help you manage or find somebody who can help you manage that without you having to do that in the group. All you gotta do is fill out this little card, put it over here, and we'll privately look at it and be able to help you manage that. That's a tool, right? Someone, they may use it, they may not, but it's a tool that says there's a safe way to manage this without having to put it out in front of everybody, right? It's also an out for that person who's frustrated and they just start, bleh, right? And they start just, barfing it out there, And we need to keep it safe for others. So how do we do that? Well, we create a tool that helps them do that. We articulate that up front, give them a safe out, and that's a good way to do that. By the way, men, if you haven't figured this out, women are much better at these tools than we are. Address the behavior. Here's the mistake that I watch happen all the time. You do it in love, but do address negative behavior. So if somebody is doing self-management in the context of group, they're assuming a role that's self-directed as opposed to group-directed, you do need to address it. If you don't address it, other people think it's safe to do the same thing because you're creating a norm. So you do need to address it, but do it in love, okay? I might remind you of some wonderful passages about our tongue, right? Our tongue can be very dangerous, one of the most dangerous weapons there is. Pay attention to environment and communication. Stay away from polarizing language. So I referenced, hey, we have something in common, we went to the same seminary. I have been in conversations where that might be a polarizing conversation. I would hope not, but I have seen that. And so if we recognize it on the front end, don't put that on the icebreaker card, Where do you stand? Here I stand. Stay away from that, okay? And then work on setup so your job becomes easier. Talk through this, plan it, don't wing it. Be intentional about groups, and it will work. That's what's so cool about it. That's all I got for you, okay? With the exception of the articles. And I did just want to say, hey, those are just tools for you. It's really hard to do all this stuff in a very short amount of time. So thank you for giving me the opportunity. And I invite you that if you ever have questions, you need more help, you want to talk about a plan, a process, any of that kind of stuff, I'm available. You can get a hold of me. I do have some older business cards you can still use to get a hold of me. But my email address is thad.warren@cune.edu. And you might just say, hey, I'm one of those PALS people because I didn't get to interact with you. I won't remember you. So make sure you just put that in the line and I'll get back to you, okay? Feel free to contact me anytime if you ever need anything. So hopefully that was helpful.